Hi everyone! Well, question today, where do you think I am? I've always wanted to pay my homage to Carcassonne, simply because it is the place that gave me the will to become a guide in the first place. When I was much younger, I once visited it with my parents, and I was fascinated by the sheer size of this huge castle, and I noticed there were all these doors that were closed, and the guides possessed the keys to every door. That's when I decided I'm going to become a guide and I'll get to see all the inside of these secret rooms. And now that I'm a real guide, I get to open the doors. Actually, I don't work here, so I don't have the keys. Anyway, filming this video was more difficult than anticipated because there were lots of roadworks and lots of noise. It was also quite windy, so we had to rewrite everything with off comments. Hope you like it! Carcassonne is situated in the southwest of France in the Languedoc. It is a hill in the valley of the Aude river between the Montagne Noire and the Massif des Corbières, the Black Mountain, and the Pyrenees and the Corbières Mountains. Therefore, it overlooks a privileged axis of passage between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. And ever since the 6th century BC, an oppidum was created on the hill named Carcassonne. Of course, the Romans also saw the strategic appeal. And during the barbaric invasions and the beginning of the Middle Ages, everybody was disputing it. Until the Troncavel dynasty settled there for the next 300 years. "52 towers in total, 2 sets of ramparts, and a castle with its own ramparts and towers. The greatest medieval ensemble in Europe." From the Greek katharos, which means pure, the Cathars were roaming around the countryside to preach their own vision of Christianity. Non-violent, poor and simple, they seduced both the humble and the rich, who were fed up with paying taxes to the opulent and distant Pope, who has his own action figure apparently.
Si toi aussi tu veux brûler des hérétiques, deviens le pape qui a défoncé les Cathares. Innocent III, bientôt chez toi.
The King of France, who had little influence and no land in the southwest, was also close to the Pope, being crowned by the church and everything. So this crusade was a win-win for him. After 36 years of crusade and the replacement of several South vassals, the king finally got his access to Mediterranean Sea. The Cathars were expelled from Carcassonne, and the cruel Simon de Montfort ruled it in the name of the king. Then, with the creation of the Inquisition, it was only a matter of time before the pyre of Montségur and the end of the Cathars. Maybe one day we'll make a longer video about the Cathars. You need to pay a fee to enter this national protected monument and discover the ancient siege of the Troncavel power. After the downfall of Troncavel and the replacement of the latter by Simon de Montfort, the local population was not super happy about the change, especially given they didn't even speak the same language. Therefore, this fourth wall was added to the ancient castle, first protecting it also from the local population. To complete this defensive architecture, there was also a dry moat and a barbicane, all directed towards the town. Visiting the castle, you will learn a lot about the history of Carcassonne, and you can have access to a very fascinating museum with very odd findings. But mostly it gives you access to all of the ramparts, and that's a kick-ass visit, which you cannot miss. Talking about ramparts, it's the moment to have a little explanation about military architecture, starting with the entrance. The main entrance of the town is situated in front of a very large dry moat. You have to pass a bridge to get inside, and then through a large barbicane pierced with arrow slits and holes, which specific shape makes it impossible to use a ram. And you end up before two very large and scary towers, and you find yourself stuck between two sets of ramparts with guards on each side. Basically, you are stuck. If you can survive this, you can pass through the second set of ramparts and access the castle, which is itself surrounded by a dry moat and towers with arrow slits and holes. The halls are these wooden galleries of the 13th century preceding the matriculations. They allow the guards to safely throw any rocks on the head of the attackers or even shoot arrows while safely staying hidden. And all along the rest of the ramparts, you can find assommoirs, which are holes above any door so that you can throw rocks on the head again. These walls are such a mess, it looks like they have band-aids all over. But that's what's great about here. You can read the course of history on these walls. In fact, they have been restored so many times you can read it clearly on the different colors on this map. Okay, let's look it up closely. First, there's 13th century, followed by Roman. Roman after 13th century? That's odd. We'll get back to that later. So, 13th century. Then Roman. After which there's more Middle Ages, and at the very top there's 19th century. Roman architecture is remarkable by the use of rubble and alignments in bricks, whereas medieval masonry is generally made with cut larger blocks. As for 19th century, it's quite obvious, less rough, less used by time. Of course, Roman masonry is anterior to medieval one. But when the King of France took possession of Carcassonne in the 13th century, he decided to expand the defense of the town by creating a second set of walls, and by heightening the first one. And between these two walls, they had to compensate the slope of the hill by carving under the foundations of the towers and reinforcing them. That should explain the anti-chronological look of the towers. And for the 19th century part, we owe it all to the famous Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. Known for the restoration of Notre-Dame in Paris and the Sainte-Chapelle, or the Château de Pierrefonds, he was also known for writing a whole encyclopedia about medieval architecture. He was the guy you would call for saving the heritage. So naturally, while the old city of Carcassonne was falling apart in the 19th century, he was called to save the day, and he rebuilt this masterpiece for future generations. The ancient cathedral, first Romanesque, then Gothic, is also worth a look. Actually, it is contemporary to the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and it looks a lot like it, especially in its stained glasses, most of which are still authentic. And it contains a very interesting piece of history, La Pierre de Siège de Toulouse. It is supposed to tell the history of the death of Simon de Montfort during the siege of Toulouse. It represents the bricole that was used to crack his skull, and in the corner, the angel lifting him in the sky. After watching several documentaries on Carcassonne, we were sad to discover that they were all mentioning the same hotel.
Hotel de la Cité is built within...
Le directeur de cet hôtel prestigieux.
The Hotel de la Cité is...
But if you are more like us and you cannot afford a 5-star hotel, as pretty as it is, check out the youth hostel, which is also very nice and pleasant, and especially super well situated, given it's literally 2 steps away from the Palais des Comtes. And as for eating, well... There are countless choices for every purse and every taste, but really what we do is get a sandwich and choose a nice place to sit. Of course, there's a legend, and it welcomes you ever since the entrance. This one simply has to do with the name of the place. Once upon a time, the city, in the hands of the Saracens, was besieged by Charlemagne.
Coucou!
The conniving ruler Lady Carcassonne had an idea to get rid of these intruders. She threw a poor pig down the ramparts at the foot of the army to make them believe that food was abundant and that they could hold a siege for a long time. To celebrate the retreat of the discouraged army, she had the bells rang to tell everyone the good news. And the word sprung amongst the villagers, Dame Carcassonne. Well, it's cute and all, but that would imply they were speaking French, which they were not, and anyway, even Charlemagne has nothing to do in the picture. But here's your legend. Classified as UNESCO Heritage since 1997, visited by over 4 million people a year, nowadays Carcassonne hosts an amazing music festival every summer, and throws a killer fireworks for the 14th of July. So, it's over already. We can't wait to see you for our next video. We already have plenty of ideas in mind, but if you have any suggestions, don't hesitate in the comments. So, as usual, like, subscribe, whatever. Thank you for following us. Bisous!